All right, take it over, Hannah and Chloe.
Hello, everyone. Chloe and I are board members from the Genetic Counseling Student Interest Group here at UCLA, otherwise known as the GC SIG. And we would love to give you kind of a brief overview of what genetic counseling looks like, and then what our group does. And hopefully it is interesting and you get involved with us. So the National Society of Genetic Counselors, which is the largest professional association of genetic counselors, defines genetic counseling as the process of helping people understand and adapt to the medical, psychological, and familial implications of genetic contributions to disease. And then if Chloe, you can go to the next slide, what that looks like in practice. It involves assessing genetic risk for disease, so family and medical history, often drawing pedigrees, to determine risk, deciding if genetic testing is best, and whether it is the optimal way to proceed in a given case, making sense of genetic testing and going over the implications of testing before and after the process, and lending emotional support, and then promoting informed decision-making, which is allows providers to empower patients to make their best choice by equipping them with the information and tools to do so.
So I believe the program directors will probably go a little more into depth about what genetic counseling is if you're not totally clear so far. So I'll dive into a little bit about what our club offers. So we're a group at UCLA, but we're also open to graduates. So if you end up finishing your UCLA career, you can still get involved. But what we offer is both education and experience as well as networking. So as far as education goes, we have a different speaker just about every week come in from the field, whether they're a current student or a practicing genetic counselor or someone else related to the field. And they give us a lot of information about what it looks like to be a genetic counselor, how you can get involved, and lots of advice, which I've found to be really pivotal to my career decisions. I didn't even know what genetic counseling was until I joined the GC SIG. And then as far as experience goes on the right there, we are able to shadow different meetings in Ronald Reagan, or on Zoom right now, but typically in the medical center on campus, like case conferences, genomic data board, and undiagnosed diseases network. And these are all really great opportunities to hear what clinicians sound like when they're discussing things. And we also have the opportunity to learn from all these people. And then lastly, networking. It is deeply important to, in any career path, figure out who is doing what you're doing and ways that you can get support from each other, and also making those connections for your career in the future. So we do provide a kind of space for you to do that with fellow students as well as professionals. And I've been able to make lots of beneficial connections and actually secured my job that I'm working in now after graduation through the GC SIG. So lots of things are out there for you. And I'll just quickly close on how you can get involved. So we meet every single Tuesday just before this meeting time, 5:30 to 6:30. We are doing a mix of Zoom and in person right now. So there's always a Zoom option available. And you can come to our events. Our next event is during week 6, and it will be a how to apply right out of undergrad into graduate school panel. And lastly, our mailing list is the way that you can stay updated about what we're up to, and there's no application or anything required. So that's it from us. I'll drop these links in the chat, but if you want to follow us on Instagram, we're on a current Instagram hiatus, but we will be back soon. And thank you all so much for giving us the time to talk about our club a little bit. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. Our contact info is on the form. Thanks.
Thank you so much, both of you, for this great presentation. If you guys have any questions for Hannah and Chloe, hopefully they're going to hang out a little bit with us. You can post questions either in the Q&A or in the chat for them. And for the sake of time, I'm going to invite Emily Quinn from KGI to continue with the presentations and to introduce her students too.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Quinn. I am the interim program director at KGI. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm joined today by Rissa Hall, who is one of our second year genetic counseling students, so soon to be graduate. And I believe for the panel Q&A, we're going to be joined by one of our recent alumni, Nicole Choi. Are my slides showing good?
Yes, we can see them.
Perfect. Okay, so let me give you just a little bit about our program at KGI. So genetic counselors are healthcare educators and advocates who work with families in the clinic to provide risk assessments, education, and support. And we help identify families who may be at risk for having an inherited condition in a variety of different specialties, which I will overview. We also work as genomic experts on a larger healthcare team, helping bridge that gap with genetics with the physicians that we work with, nurses. We also work to help identify the most appropriate genetic tests and the meaning of results. And so some of our traditional areas of practice are in the prenatal and preconception realm. So people that are pregnant, planning to become pregnant and want to know the chance of having a child with a genetic condition. General pediatrics, so these might be children who have concern for autism spectrum disorder, developmental delay, they may be born with congenital anomalies. The oncology or cancer realm of genetics continues to be booming, so better understanding why some families get more cancer than others. And then there's also general adult genetics, which many of these pediatric conditions, these individuals grow older and continue to see genetics as adults, for example. Some emerging areas of subspecialty include cardiology, neurology, psychiatry. The list continues to go on. I think as genetic testing becomes more widely utilized in our healthcare field, the room for clinical genetics and thus for genetic counselors will continue to evolve into pretty much all healthcare subspecialties. But we also have a number of genetic counselors who work in non-clinical roles. So while many of these training programs were initially designed to train clinical genetic counselors, we know that the landscape of our workforce is quite a bit more diverse than that. And we have a number of genetic counselors who work in industry, work at genetic testing laboratories. They may be involved with variant interpretation. They may act as a medical science liaisons. And then we have genetic counselors that are heavily involved in research. So the role that I have currently, I'm heavily involved in education. So it's one degree, but with many different possibilities. So a little bit about our program. We emphasize interprofessional collaboration, problem solving, and personalized healthcare. Our program is dedicated to benefiting society through the education, training, and development of innovative, culturally engaged, articulate, and caring genetic counselors to better serve the needs of individual patients, our healthcare system, as well as the bioscience industry. So this is our mission statement and how we do this. So I'm going to provide a very brief overview of our curriculum. We are a 70.5 credit program that is taken over the course of 21 months, so just short of 2 years. And about half of these credits are really rigorous didactic coursework. So you're in class, in lectures, actively working in the material with the educational material. 26 of the credits encompass our clinical fieldwork. So these are our rotation sites for our students. They start the summer between year 1 and year 2 in their fieldwork placements. And then also there are 12 credits that go towards research and the student capstone projects. So year 1 of our program is very course heavy. And then year 2 of the program is much more focused on fieldwork and capstone. So the curriculum we have a variety of different umbrellas, if you will, and we have our courses that are genetic and genomic principles. So this is where we ensure that our students have a strong understanding of the science behind the genetic conditions that they will be counseling about. Our genetics and healthcare series include our medical genetics course, our cancer genetics course, how clinical genetics exists currently within a variety of different healthcare specialties. Then we have our genetic counseling and practice courses. These are the courses that I teach that bridge our genetic and genomic principles courses with genetics and healthcare. So how do you take very complex scientific information and communicate it in a meaningful way to someone who doesn't have a science or a medical background? We have our professional development courses. So these involve our case conference and journal club. In the second year of the program, we have a formal professional development course for how to better prepare for the jobs that you will take, CV development, for example. And then also we do a year-long boards review course for our second year students as well. And then we have our capstone project. So this, I will speak about this a little bit later on another slide. So I'm going to skip over there too. And then of course, our field work, which is really, I think, the crown for most of our students are the fieldwork placements. So what this shakes out to in year one, as I mentioned, it is very didactic coursework heavy. We have students taking a variety of courses. At the very bottom, you will see our genetic counseling fieldwork observation. So as I mentioned, the rotations don't actually start until the summer between year one and year two, but we do have students getting their fieldwork, their feet wet in fieldwork in this observation course, where they spend a few days in clinic each semester in an maternal fetal medicine office. So observing prenatal reproductive genetic counseling, as well as a cancer genetics clinic. And then we also, part of this course involves working with standardized patient encounters. So getting some of that experience with counseling with standardized patients before you go into field work and actually counsel real patients. And then we have a variety of guest lecturers who come and present on different specialties. So the summer between year one and year two, I mentioned, we have students in their first fieldwork placement. So this is a 6 to 8 week rotation that's full-time for 40 hours a week. So during this summer between year one and year two, students kind of feel like they have work in a full-time job. And then year two of the program, as I mentioned, is much lighter on coursework. So currently we have students in psychosocial development, professional development, and then our boards review course, as well as case conference and journal club involvement. And that is just once every 3 weeks that students are doing those courses. And that allows them to just have the flexibility to really spend time on their independent capstone projects, as well as their fieldwork placements. So something to note if you are interested in our program at KGI. So I mentioned year one, it's very heavily didactic. It is based in Claremont. But year two, we have 2 different tracks that students can match into. They can match into our Southern California based track. And I will talk about some of the training opportunities we have here in Southern California, or students can match into our flexible track, where students can have rotations outside of Southern California with our affiliates outside of this area. And I'll speak a little bit about that as well. So some of the training opportunities we have. So we are a program that is not embedded within a medical center, which means all of our rotations are external to KGI. So our students rotate through a variety of centers, both in industry. So we have Fulgent Genetics, Quest Diagnostics on there, for example, but also clinical. So we have the Kaiser system that our students rotate through, as well as specialty clinics such as at City of Hope in oncology. So this is a map of the different sites we have throughout Southern California. It's quite expansive. And the reason why I show this is that any student who matches into our program, we do advise you are going to need a car to be able to travel to these different rotation sites. We do our best to consider where students are currently living when we think about placement. So if there's a student that's located, many students in the first year of the program choose to live in the Claremont area if they weren't already living in Southern California, just for the proximity to campus. But for the second year, because you're not coming very often to Claremont, most of our students end up living in Los Angeles or Orange County or elsewhere in Southern California, in San Bernardino County, one student we have in Riverside. And so we do try and take that into account when we place students, as well as preferences for location, but our sites do go as north as Santa Barbara, as well as south as San Diego. But the students who we've placed there have always been very, very happy with those placements. And then for our track 2, flexible track, some of the sites that we have had students at so far have included our site in Las Vegas. We've had a student at 2 sites in New Mexico. We've had students in Northern California. No one yet has gone to Alaska, but we do have an affiliation agreement there. And then for the first time this spring semester, we had 2 students on our flex track that were very excited to get to go to Hawaii, and we will continue to plan to use them. So a little bit about our capstone project. This is something that starts year 1 of the program in our year-long research methodology course, and it is a student-led capstone project. So the timeline looks in research methods. Students are working on their literature reviews, thinking about research questions, beginning to assemble their capstone committee, thinking about what methodologies they would use for their research questions. And then ultimately the goal is to be submitting to the institutional review board by the end of year 1, kind of going into summer. Then in year 2 of the program, our students are collecting their data, they are doing analysis, and ultimately writing up their results. And then this culminates into the end goal. So for KGI, it is required for our students to complete a manuscript and to present at our genetics research symposium. But we do encourage our students to consider sending their abstracts to national conferences, such as the National Society of Genetic Counselors annual conference, or Southern California Genetic Counselor annual conference. And then for those really strong capstone projects, we do encourage submitting to a peer-reviewed journal. And currently, I have 4 of our alumni who are working on developing their manuscripts to submit to a peer-reviewed journal. We have one who's finding a home in different oncology journals, aiming for that readership. And so what kind of topics do our students work with? We have students who have done projects relevant to cultural engagement and cultural humility, inclusion and equity, access to genetics care. Because our program is embedded within a school of pharmacy and health sciences, some students have optimized on that opportunity to work with our pharmacy faculty to do research relevant to pharmacogenomics. And then we have one student this year who's been really focused on genetic counseling admissions process and whether or not genetic counseling programs should be utilizing the GRE. And so who should apply to our program? Every accredited program is phenomenal and unique in their own way. And who we're looking for are students who are excited to combine a passion for science with direct patient care, to be on the forefront of personalized genomics medicine. So the careers and jobs that our current graduates are going into now are not going to be necessarily the same landscape of what jobs look like in genetic counseling 10 years from now. And so we want students who are really excited to be on the forefront of that, and not just taking the information learned for the jobs today, but also how to continue to apply it with the jobs that will be 10 years from now. Students who want to interface with genetic testing laboratories in the biotech industry. So KGI, we are a very tech focused institution with a number of industry connections. So that is something that so our program is still relatively new. We just graduated our 2nd cohort. Rissa, who's with us today, is going to be a member of our 3rd cohort to graduate. But that is something we're beginning to distinguish ourselves with just having some of these industry opportunities. Of course, folks who are excited to work in a rapidly evolving field and to engage as lifelong learners. So a little bit about our program and what we consider to be the KGI difference. So KGI is an institution I was not familiar with before I came into this job, but we are within the larger Claremont colleges, which means we have a lot of resources. Such as different student services, our library. We have a very diverse array, as you saw, of location and clinical opportunities. We do things a little different where most of our courses that are didactic, we use a flipped classroom approach where we have students watching videos and doing readings. And instead of initially grasping that information in the classroom setting, they are coming to class having learned that information at a self-pace. Some students may be able to go through some material very quickly because it's review for them. Others, they might be a little more rusty in that area. So taking whatever time you need to grasp the material and then engaging in a lot of activities to better optimize the time you're spending with your professors and fellow classmates. We have a very close relationship with our sister program, which is the Master of Science in Human Genetics and Genomic Data Analytics. So while our students take all of the genetic core curriculum together, but while our students are doing psychosocial development and other courses that are really relevant to the translation of the science into clinic, the GDA students are working in with bioinformatics and dive a little bit deeper into variant analysis. So there are some folks who come thinking they want to be a genetic counselor and actually realize that they're more interested in the lab-based part of genetic counseling and opt for the GDA program. We have most of the faculty that teach our courses are genetic counselors with their own unique specialty and focus. We do offer a diversity scholarship every year, as well as a cultural engagement scholarship to match students every year. And then because we are a new program, we're excited for folks who want to come and make their mark in a new and developing program, because what our program looks like today is so different than what it looked like when we first started. And so much of that is the direct response to student feedback. And I think I'm going a bit over time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop share and give it over to UCLA, but I will be available to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Emily, for keeping track of time too. And yes, we will have some time, hopefully at the end, to answer some questions. So Christina, take it over.
Thank you. And thank you, Emily. That was a great presentation. My name is Christina Palmer, and I'm a professor at UCLA and the program director for the new UCLA Masters of Science in Genetic Counseling. And I will share my screen and tell you about this program. So hold on one moment. All right, so the UCLA Genetic Counseling Program is housed within the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. It is a new program. We will be graduating our first class this June, and Sammy, who is here today, is one of our students in the inaugural class who will be graduating. This is just a quick look at our program leadership and administration for the program. So it's not just me as program director involved in the design and implementation of this program, but the associate director, Nagme Durrani, an assistant program director, Rebecca Lachey, and a medical director, Dr. Derek Wong. And we have Jerome Kay as the student affairs officer. Our program, as I mentioned, is in the School of Medicine at UCLA. More specifically, it's in the Department of Human Genetics, which is in the School of Medicine, and is a key initiative of UCLA's Institute for Precision Health. That was a chancellor's initiative, and so there's substantial institutional support for our graduate program. Our program obviously is in Los Angeles, which is just such a phenomenal area with diversity on so many dimensions, including ethnic diversity, cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, and geographic diversity. We currently take 10 students per year, and our classes start in the fall. So UCLA is on the quarter system, as you are aware, and so our classes start in the fall quarter. Our program is accredited, and we participate in the match, which you may have heard Emily mention the word match a couple of times. And if you have any questions about that, we can talk about that during the Q&A. The mission of our program is really consonant with UCLA's mission overall. which is to foster inclusion, commitment to social engagement, to address pressing societal needs, and to disseminate and apply knowledge for the betterment of society and to educate successive generations of leaders. Our program philosophy and design. Philosophy is one of integrating the science of genetics and genomics with knowledge, counseling, research, and communication skills in order to ethically and effectively deliver genetic counseling services in a variety of settings. And so the design is such that we start with fundamental principles or concepts or skills at the beginning of a course or the beginning of a quarter, and then they advance in nuance and complexity across that course or across the quarter, or across the sequencing of the curriculum. And our courses include structured learning activities. They include fieldwork activities, standardized patients, capstone experience. And all of these are really meant for students to apply what they're learning to promote the development of practice-based competencies. And the practice-based competencies are directly meant to be competencies that an entry-level genetic counselor should have. Our courses are standard classroom courses. It's meant to be an in-person program. We use active learning techniques to foster student learning. And we have clinical training as well, which we expect individuals will develop their skills from novice to intermediate to advanced skills. Overall, if you counted the number of units required for this program, they would add up to 75 units over 2 years. Roughly, I could parse them in terms of 44 units of coursework, 19 units of field work, and 12 units towards the capstone project. Our objectives are really to train diverse cohorts of genetic counseling students to engage in an evidence-based practice. We don't want people to just on a whim decide what they want to talk about. Really, everything should be evidence-based. To be able to critically think and evaluate and synthesize research findings, and to address and appropriately act on ethical, legal, and social issues in the discipline and practice of genetic counseling. So we do this through coursework, we do this through field work, capstone project, and interactions with other genetic counselor role models. The next 2 slides give an overview of our curriculum. It is a 2-year program. And as I mentioned, UCLA is on the quarter system. So these slides will divide the coursework by quarter. And so this is the first year of curriculum. And it is mostly where the first year is primarily coursework, not exclusively coursework, but primarily. And many of the courses have associated with them curricular activities or co-activities. You'll see in the first year, this 400A, B, and C, that's a focus on learning everything about medical genetics. So the principles and practices of medical genetics. So that takes 3 quarters to really get through that material. Then we also have 401, fundamental genetic counseling skills. So in the fall, students will begin to also develop their counseling skills. In the winter, it becomes 402, where now the practice is more focused on a particular content area or practice area, reproductive genetics. In the spring, it's 403, where the content now begins to specialize in cancer, neurogenetics, and cardiogenetics, but always bringing in those counseling skills as well. In the fall, there's a course, clinical applications of cytogenetics and molecular techniques. And so this is a course where the students learn about how various forms of genetics testing happens, how the test reports are formed, how to interpret a test report. So the fall is on cyto and molecular techniques. In the winter, it becomes 410, translational genomics. And the focus there is on exome sequencing and RNA sequencing, so emerging diagnostics. UCLA has a clinical exome sequencing center and offers that kind of test clinically. And we have for a long time at this point. And so we have a lot of in-house experience with that. And associated with that class, you can see is genome data board. So the students would attend a weekly meeting where clinicians and laboratory folks, bioinformaticians, review patient exome data and decide how to interpret it and what to report back. Also in the fall is really the beginning of coursework related to the capstone. And in the first is the responsible conduct of research involving humans, because that's really important that research be conducted responsibly. In the winter and in the spring, you can see there's 411 and 412. 411 Foundations in Genetic Counseling Research, 412 Research Applications in Genetic Counseling. And these courses help to facilitate students to understand how to think about a research question, how to design a research study, how to arrive at a capstone committee, how to interpret data. And so they are really supporting our students in their development of their capstone projects, so that by the end of spring in the first year, they're really ready to sort of launch into their human subjects protocol, or depending on the nature of the research, or begin implementing their research. Also in the spring is an ethical issues in genetic counseling course taught by a bioethicist. And in orange, you can see here is the first field work. So our students will begin field work, and by that I mean interacting with patients in the clinic, like speaking to patients in the clinic. Okay, and so that's again the quarter is 10 weeks long, so the field work is 10 weeks long. You can see this is a dip your toes in the water kind of a field work, a couple of hours a week. So in terms of curricular activities, UCLA has a plethora of opportunities. And so students are required to attend a certain number of seminars or grand rounds, and to really think about how what they're learning in their class is being discussed in seminars. They're co-learning with other students in some of the classes, and I'll touch base on that a little bit in another slide. We have genetics clinics at UCLA, and so as part of curricular activity with the genetic counseling skills class, students are required to attend the genetics case conference and inpatient rounds, where they learn an incredible amount of information about patients that were seen in the clinic. They're also assigned to clinics in the fall, in the winter as observers, as active observers, where they are seeing patient provider interactions and reflecting on those interactions and how what they're learning in their counseling skills is being applied in the clinic. In the second, so then there's the summer between year 1 and year 2, where the students have a fairly intensive field work, 10 weeks long, 30 to 40 hours a week. And then in year 2, fall, winter, and spring, you can see that the field work appears in every quarter. And at this point in the academic year, the field work is about 15 to 20 hours a week in a clinical or a laboratory industry setting. And that the amount of didactic coursework is starting to diminish. So in the fall of the first year, of the second year, the students take an advanced genetic counseling skills class and a genetic counseling communications seminar, where they learn about communicating genetic information via a variety of modalities, including different forms of social media. And the students begin taking units of directed individual study, so that they have time carved out to be able to work on their capstone projects. In the winter is the last of their didactic courses, professional development in genetic counseling, where really students are learning about next steps, transitioning to the workforce and what that means, and more of their capstone development. And in the spring, it's all devoted to finalizing their capstone projects and their last field work. So it's a fairly rigorous curriculum. It's 12 units each quarter, which is the equivalent of a full-time student. Our fieldwork placements. Okay, so as you saw, students begin with with clinical observations in the first year, fall and winter, and then move into being active, interacting with the patients in the spring of the first year through the spring of the second year. Our fieldwork sites are at UCLA and in the greater Los Angeles area. And as Emily mentioned, LA and the environs, that's a lot of territory to cover. And so students will find it much easier to get to fieldwork placements that are outside of UCLA if they have access to a car. Los Angeles does not have very good mass transportation. It's a pretty car-centric city. Okay, go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about the capstone project. So it is an individual original research project. Its purpose is to demonstrate a student's ability to address a research question relevant to the discipline and practice of genetic counseling. Our students receive preparation and mentoring for their capstone project through those various courses that I talked about, through a research committee that they all have, and through a research oversight committee, which is sort of monitoring all the individual capstone committees and projects. The outcomes of this capstone requirement are writing up an abstract that is keyed to a conference, developing a poster presentation, giving an oral presentation through a graduate research colloquium, and writing up the study and the results in the form of a journal manuscript that could be submitted to a journal if the research if the whole experience was strong enough. There are many ideas for research. There will never not be ideas for research. And remember, genetic counseling, we're training our students, to practice through an evidence base. And what you'll discover is we're still, accumulating evidence for our practice. And so there's lots of areas for research. I've been involved with students' research projects for a long time at different institutions before UCLA had its own program. And I just give some examples of different projects I have mentored students on. There was a student at a program that her project evaluated how non-invasive prenatal screening tests were labeled, and how did that change or affect a person's decision about taking a test, opting for prenatal screening or not. That paper won the Best Trainee Paper Award a couple of years ago, so that was a very satisfying result from her project. Another student that I worked with at another program was quite interested in the type of training students received in their master's program regarding deaf awareness, and her work was published. Here are two titles from two current students that I just wanted to draw some attention to: Predictors of Imposter Syndrome in a diverse sample of genetic counselors and genetic counseling students. The role of psychosocial factors in Black women's engagement with genetic counseling and testing for hereditary breast and ovarian cancer. And so the idea is just that you can see the topics vary widely, and there are many potential projects out there. So I'm glad that there are hundreds of genetic counseling students that are working on projects. UCLA, because it has a medical center, has a variety of clinics for students to rotate in and observe. There's prenatal clinics, pediatrics, different forms of pediatrics clinics and general genetics clinics, different cancer clinics, and some specialty clinics. We have cardiovascular genetics clinic and neurogenetics clinic, undiagnosed diseases clinic. There are other opportunities for students to observe in different clinics that serve patients with genetic conditions. And also we have agreements with medical institutions outside of UCLA for our students to rotate in as well. It's never a good idea to just have a clinical experience in just one institution, because you'll learn a lot about that institution, but you'll be surprised when you go out and work and discover different institutions might operate differently. Our instructors have a range of expertise. Genetic counselors, clinical geneticists, other specialty clinicians, ethicists, laboratory geneticists, etc. Our program does embed interactions with other trainees. There's an intercampus medical genetics fellows program, where these are individuals who are training to become clinical geneticists, laboratory geneticists. So these will be your colleagues genetic counselors do work in multidisciplinary teams. And so this is a nice opportunity for different future healthcare providers to get to know what each other's scope of practice is and to really appreciate their knowledge and expertise. Our program is in the Human Genetics, Department of Human Genetics has a PhD program, and our students, now that once we're back in person, we'll have more opportunities to interact with doctoral students through seminars and academic retreats. We are very intentional about providing opportunities for our students to interact with students in other programs, including like the KGI program and the UC Irvine program. We have dedicated events for our students to all participate in. UCLA has a large undergraduate population, as you might be aware, and our students are eligible to become teaching assistants, and so they get to interact with students, undergrads that way. There's the UCLA Genetic Counseling Student Interest Group, and of course, there are other UCLA graduate students that our students could interact with. We do offer different forms of financial assistance. There's at the university level, Graduate Opportunity Fellowship Program, the Graduate Council Diversity Fellowship Program, where so far, some of our students have been successful in obtaining these fellowships. They're quite lucrative. Other financial assistance opportunities, I mentioned teaching assistantships. That's actually a job. You get paid, plus you get the experience of teaching. And I happen to have a slush fund for supporting some students for a little while in the development of their capstone project. Our program also offers tuition assistance via the two different tracks that we have. And we also provide some financial assistance to help for capstone related costs, if there are any, and for students to attend a professional conference in their second year. This is my last slide, and I just wanted to, in case, to put things in context in terms of a timeline. This is this year's timeline from application to decision, basically. So sometime in the fall, right after Labor Day, well, no, I can't even remember when Labor Day is, maybe, whatever. These happen at the same time, roughly. So the match system opens and everybody has to register for that. Then the application, so this is, late summer, early fall, generally for all of the schools, the application will open for applying, to enter the following fall. And then the applications will close anywhere from probably December 1st through February 1st. And each program is going to have their own application deadline. So you would need to be aware of what that is. Then the applications will be reviewed and interview invites will be sent out. And you could imagine that will happen in January, February, March. Okay, so winter-ish. And then, with those interviews, okay. And then tomorrow actually is the deadline. So about mid-April for candidates to submit their rank order list and for programs to submit their rank order list. So everybody's ranking, what program they want to go to or what, and the programs are ranking the candidates. And then this matching algorithm determines then which candidates match to which programs, and those results will come out about 10 days after the deadline for submitting the rank order list. So that's coming up. So we're in that exciting phase right now. But you can see it's, a good, 6 month process from registering for the match through learning the results. Here's a photo of our two classes. They're beautiful faces. So happy that they're at UCLA, and that is the end of the UCLA program.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christina. And we only have like about 10 minutes left. So I want to invite Samantha, Chloe, and Risa to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the program that they are attending, the year they are in, and then hopefully I'm going to make our participants, since we are a small group, able to talk, and then they can ask questions from everybody. So Samantha, you're the first on my screen. Would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. I am a second-year student at UCLA, so I'm the inaugural class to hopefully graduate in June. And what else? I grew up in Southern California, have been away from here for a long time, so very happy to be back and really loving this program. And I'll be working in Southern California as a cancer genetic counselor upon graduation.
Where did you do your undergrad?
I did my undergrad at MIT in Boston, and I studied brain and cognitive sciences there.
Thank you. So next on my screen is Chloe Whitten.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm a first-year student at UCLA. I in the genetic counseling program. I did my undergrad at UCLA as well as an MCDB major and a Soc Gen minor. In between grad school and this program, I worked in an industry. I worked at Ambry Genetics, which is an industry role, sort of like a genetic counseling assistant there. And yeah, this program, the last question was just talk about the program a little. Was that it?
You can mention the experience in there.
Yeah, it's definitely exceeded my expectations for the program. I think the slide that Christina showed of the diversity of rotations that are available, like, doesn't quite explain how interesting it is to really see each specialty and things I didn't even know had genetic backgrounds like ophthalmology or immunogenetics.
Risa?
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Rissa. I'm a second-year genetic counseling student at KGI. I am originally from rural Nebraska. Did my undergrad at Tulane University in New Orleans, studying neuroscience and psychology. In between undergrad and applying to KGI, I worked at the One-Ohm Pharmacogenomics Laboratory, as well as interned with Gene Matters as a GCA. And one of the things that I really love about KGI is just the amount of, first off, the size of the cohort is wonderful. If, you know, it's really been great. The diversity of experiences that my classmates have brought in really mean I'm getting both that classroom learning as well as like a really diverse kind of range of cultural perspectives and things in class. So that's been really, really wonderful. And then I've accepted a position back in Minneapolis as a pediatric GC. So I'm really, really excited there. And congratulations, Samantha, as well on your position. And yeah, looking forward to hearing questions.
So Amber, Lauren, and Nicole, if you have any questions, you can either raise your hands or put it in the Q&A. Until while you're thinking, I have one question that I get always from students. How did you make sure that this is the right place for you? What are some of the things, activities that you have engaged in to make sure that genetic counseling is the right field? And since Risa, I have you on my screen, why won't you start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely took a roundabout way of coming to genetics. I definitely thought that I would be working sort of in mental health or in medicine. And it really took a little bit of both soul searching as well as kind of working in different spaces and kind of getting a feel for what that looked like as an employee. And so I think both the sort of classroom learning can definitely be beneficial, but also any real world like employment experience you have, for me, that really sealed the deal for me as far as wanting to be in genetics as a career.
Samantha?
Yeah, I would definitely echo everything that Rissa said. I think this is definitely a career where it's really helpful to gain some kind of hands-on experience as much as possible, which can be difficult sometimes, but being in the LA area is really helpful. There are so many programs here and so many clinics here. So because it's kind of a, somewhat unknown profession, kind of most people know what an accountant does or what a ER doctor does. Not everyone really knows what the day-to-day of a genetic counselor looks like. So doing things like this, coming to events where you can talk with people who are either genetic counselors or who are in programs or program directors can be really helpful, as well as shadowing genetic counselors if you have that opportunity. So I would say that was really what was most helpful for me to determine if it was the right fit, and also really helpful in applying to schools to know that, okay, I've kind of done my research, I know what I need to do, or I know why this is something that is really the right fit for me. And then doing some soul searching and figuring out why do I feel like this is the right fit. You'll do a lot of reflecting in graduate school, you'll find. And so it's a good practice from that perspective as well to get a sense of kind of what your motivations are. So to summarize, I would say kind of that introspection, understanding what your strengths are, why genetic counseling is interesting to you, and then to getting some experience if possible, to really understand what the day-to-day looks like.
Chloe?
Those were both such comprehensive answers that I really want to echo everything that you guys said, but the only thing I'll add in addition to that is sometimes it can be really hard to get shadowing experience, especially with COVID-19 and everything. So something that I found that was really helpful is you can reach out to genetic counselors on the NSGC Find a Genetic Counselor Near Me page and see what genetic counselors are open to being contacted. And since it's likely going to be a phone call or a Zoom meeting, you don't have to limit yourself to Los Angeles for that meeting. If there is a specialty that you're really interested in, or you saw a paper that had a genetic counselor and you recognize their name, it can be really helpful to reach out that way as well. But I think also the day-to-day is something that I would, if you have access to be able to shadow, I feel like that is a really good way to be able to see if this is a career you'd like to do. And then also maybe exploring the non-conventional paths. So, you know, seeing what a lab GC does, think about long-term, how are ways I could be interested in this field for the rest of my career. Just sort of seeing, you know, it's not just doing prenatal forever. You could switch over time and learning more about those opportunities.
Since I don't see any other question, let me just see. So Risa put something in the chat. Thank you, Risa. So one more question from me. How many schools did you apply to, and how did you decide on which schools will fit your needs? Risa, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can definitely start. So I was a two-time applicant. My first application cycle, I applied to 4 programs, interviewed at 1, and then withdrew for sort of family reasons from the match. And then my second application cycle, I applied to 8 programs and then ultimately landed on KGI, just sort of as a combination of location, program, and just when I interviewed with the specifically the program director and Emily at the time, really just immediately had this sense of like, okay, can I pick my life up and move across the country for this program? Yeah, I can do it.
Samantha?
Yeah, so I was very geographically restricted. I had just moved back to Southern California and bought a house. So I knew I was going to stay here kind of no matter what. So I applied to basically all the programs within, you know, a certain radius of where I lived. And then just through interviews and through talking with program leadership, just found that UCLA was the right fit for me. Yeah.
Chloe?
Yeah, so I applied to 8 schools. I had maybe the exact opposite experience as Sammy, where I was not geographically restricted at all. I kind of saw it as a good opportunity for me to, you know, see other parts of the country. Coincidentally, I ended up back at my undergrad institution, which is, you know, like 40 miles from my hometown, but that's just how it works out. But I was really looking for the clinical experience. That was something that was really important to me. How early do you get to see patients? You know, and what type of clinics do you get experience in? And a lot of the schools that had that also happen to be in Southern California. So that worked out very well for me. Yeah, and the way that I ranked it was like they were saying, you know, experience from the faculty, conversations with the current students I thought was really helpful to get an insight on what, again, that day-to-day life is like in the program. Yeah, very happy.
Lauren seems to have a question. Go ahead, Lauren. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so a couple of you guys like talked about taking like gap years between. So can you just speak more about like what you guys did during your gap years, and I guess like what other like types of like jobs like do you recommend to like explore like genetic counseling during your gap year?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. So I have worked just about every different kind of service industry job. And I think the important thing to know is that like, even if you aren't working for a lab or, you know, directly working for a genetic counselor, there are still so many valuable things that you can take away from any job that you do. So, you know, if that's like in my experience working retail, I learned how to listen to people and figure out how to meet them where they are. I worked for a pediatric dentist, and that taught me how to talk to kids and their grown-ups, and you know, how to work with insurance companies. And then eventually that experience was what I was able to leverage to get a position in customer service at a genetic testing lab. And then kind of from there, pieces started to fall into place as far as pursuing genetic counseling. So I really do want to encourage you, like, even if the first position isn't like, I'm working as a GCA, or I'm working for a genetic counselor or in a hospital, always be on the lookout for ways that that particular job that you do wind up doing can build the skills that you'll need as a genetic counselor. So if you have an informational interview with a genetic counselor, with a prospective student, it's a really great idea to ask them what skills they built and what skills they think are most important, and then just look for something that'll help you develop those.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that because I definitely did not have kind of the typical path that you might think of to become a genetic counselor. I actually didn't even learn what genetic counseling was until about a year before I started the program. So I took a very circuitous route. I took about 6 years off between undergrad and grad school. Wasn't even sure I was going to go to grad school. I was a dancer for about 5 of those years. And so totally echo what Rissa says. You can really take your experiences and figure out how do these contribute to who I am now. And I think it was actually a conversation I had with Christina before I even knew that UCLA was going to be an accredited program. And she said, figure out how like your dots connect, what has kind of led you to where you are. And so I think that's a great way to think about it in hindsight. You guys have the advantage of knowing what genetic counseling is now much earlier than I did. So so there are kind of 2 ways you can take it. Like Rissa said, you can kind of pursue what interests you and figure out how those things can help you build the skills that you would want to have as a genetic counselor: communication, advocacy, those sorts of things. But then it's also helpful if you kind of know that genetic counseling is something you want to go into. I've definitely heard of students taking a gap year to be a genetic counseling assistant if that's an opportunity that's available to them, and can be really helpful to kind of build those skills, really make sure it's something that you want to do before you actually go into the program. And I'm sure Chloe can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so my first job out of school, when I was looking for jobs, I was really looking for a sciencey background because that's what I got my degree in. And so the first job I got was not related to genetics. It was like a vaccine research company. And that was really interesting. But I feel when I was doing that job day in and day out, I was like, how is this helping me be a better genetic counselor? It's not giving me personal skills. I'm not learning about genetics. And so I think having that reflection of whatever job you get, what value is it bringing? So Rissa saying, you know, customer service, even at a pediatric dentist, even though it's not genetic, it still gives you a lot of experience. I think that it's important to have that reflection before you accept the job and see, how is this helping me reach the goal that I want? And then, yeah, I was thinking about that. And then the job position opened at Ambry. I was like, this is perfect timing. It was made for me. And then I got my lab and more psychosocial experience from there.
Any
other questions? Because we are a little bit over time, so I just want to make sure that all of your questions are answered. So Amber, Lauren, Nicole, if you have any other questions, now is the time to ask.
I'm also happy. I'll go ahead and put my email
Oh,
in the
that would
chat.
be awesome.
Yeah, I don't know
Yes.
if the other students want to, but yeah, if y'all just have any questions that come up the second you log out of the Zoom, I know that happens to me all the time.
It does happen. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your participation, for the presentations. I learned a lot. It was, the event was recorded, will be on YouTube for students who couldn't come today. And thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom and advice and tips on how to make sure that this is the right field for students who might be interested in genetic counseling. I know there are so many healthcare options out there. It's kind of hard to choose sometimes. So thank you for the guidance. I'm going to stop recording now.